cut the sugar in the Caribbean, they went for black labor. I no disrespect to the whites who are here. I'm not racist. I'm just speaking the truth. The reality is, one of the things that black men and black women have that is intrinsic to them is that they're stronger than other races. And more skilled than other races do. So, I have taken the position, and I've said this to our builders, nobody should be able to build faster and better than us. But our people have not been challenged over the years. I mean, during slavery, we had to work. We were forced, we were actually driven to work. We were flogged to work. But what we have done in Antigua is that we have actually motivated the domestic population to work. So what happened during the construction of the Sinoville Riches Academy is that you had Antiguans and Barbadians working shift, working 24/7, and they were successful in completing a new, brand, well-built secondary school within 2 months and 1 week. Great accomplishment. So there's some exciting things that are happening on the island. One of the things that, or one of the decisions that we've taken, which will create significant opportunities for us, is the transformation of the Five Islands facility into the 4th campus of the University of the West Indies. Your government has decided recently to transfer the ownership of the Five Islands facility to UAE. And that will be completed within a matter of weeks. Because we have determined that within the next, perhaps 18 months, that the university campus in Antigua should become fully functional. And what we're seeking to do here is to, let's say, democratize tertiary education. We want to make sure that every Antiguan and Barbudan will have the opportunity to access to a university education. And the objective is to ensure that within the next 30 years, that at least 50% of our country's population will have had a university degree. That is the objective. You may not be aware of this, but we have in the region of 984 students presently on scholarships abroad. Presently, we're spending $25 million annually to support those students to be educated abroad. But the point that we're making is that we can spend those monies locally and we can educate more people. And that is why there is a need for university, and our repurposing of the Five Islands facility was a strategic decision. What it did is that it gave us the opportunity to leapfrog other OECS countries to get that full campus, because we had a ready-made facility that we could have made available to serve as a physical campus. The others did not. So those who are arguing that the facility should remain as a secondary school or should be utilized as a secondary school, they are missing the issue. And by the way, there's no space problem with our secondary schools at this point. We have added over 200,000 square feet of secondary school space within the last year. So the secondary school space requirements have been fully satisfied, and at the same time, within 18 months, you will get a university. So it's a win-win situation. Now, I can speak extensively about other successes. I mean, West Indies Oil Company, you know that we purchased that company. The government now has 51% shares. It is majority owned by the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. That company, and this is no exaggeration, is being run better today, managed by Antiguans, not expatriates, by Antiguans, making more profits, greater capital expenditure. In fact, within the last year, West Indies Oil Company invested over $50 million to refurbish and to expand its tank farm. So whereas before, the private owners were literally milking, sweating the assets and repatriating all of the funds, today, at least 51% of those profits are going into the treasury to fund development. And at the same time, we're making sure that they continue to reposition the West Indies Oil Company as a major player, not only in Antigua and Barbuda, but to position West Indies Oil Company to become a regional conglomerate. You recognize that we did a very skillful transaction 2 years ago, in which we acquired the majority shares in West Indies Oil Company without spending 1 cent in public taxes or increasing the borrowings by 1 cent. We did a speculative deal in which we acquired it for $1, and this is just an example, not literally $1, and sold it for $2, even before we completed the ownership. So these are some of the exciting things that we're doing. We have created our own economic model that we call entrepreneurial socialism. This is not a socialist construct. It is capitalism at work, but ensuring that the profits that are generated, that the masses can share equitably in those profits. So that West Indies Oil Company, as an example, last year we got a check for $6 million. That's $6 million going into your treasury to fund healthcare, to fund education, to provide employment. This year we should get a check in the region of about $7 million, and we expect it to increase exponentially. There are other private investments that we're making. We've taken an equity stake in the new Royalton Hotel to be built by Sunwing, so the government people of Antigua and Barbuda will have about 20% ownership. In the new Callaloo Key Hotel, we will have another 20% ownership. What we're doing here is that we are partnering with the private sector to make sure that we can literally facilitate investments that ordinarily could not be pursued by the government on its own or by the private sector on its own. What we're literally doing is that we're crowding in, not crowding out investments. We are facilitating these investments and making sure too that the people of Antigua and Barbuda, that they have a sustainable stake in these businesses. And at the same time, to ensure that we get taxes from these companies, and at the same time that we get dividends. And by getting dividends, what you're doing is that you're further socializing the profits for the benefit of the people. This is not coming out of any textbook. You have a very pragmatic government, a government that is practicing what I call entrepreneurship, utilizing our business skills to create value for the people of Antigua and Barbuda. And you would recognize too that as we make we take these decisions, we continue to account to the nation. In fact, every Thursday after our Wednesday cabinet, there is a full report given to the media. We have a media conference in which we keep the people informed. We believe in transparent and accountable governance. That is our commitment, and that shall not change. Now, you know the political mischief. From time to time, stories are actually fabricated. And it is unfortunate that sometimes we have to defend them. And two of the stories that would have developed within the last year, and I will speak to them openly. One of the things that was said about my government is that I took $5 million of public funds and placed it into my wife's charity. Now, that was just pure mischief. There's nothing further from the truth. In fact, what we did is that we created a program of entrepreneurship in which the government had agreed to make $5 million available for the development of an entrepreneurial fund. My dear wife decided at the time, and this was about 18 months ago, to make $500,000 available from her charity to fund female entrepreneurship. So it would have been a gift from her charity. The name of the charity is SHARE. Not to take anything from the government, not to manage any funds on behalf of the government, but you had mischievous people in Antigua who decided to make a political issue out of it, spun it, to the extent that there were people who actually believed something that was not true. Even calypsos were written about it. So after I recognized that the lie was becoming entrenched, and by the way, I don't believe in suing people, but when you're trying to entrench lies, and you're going to bring my wife's character into disrepute for something that is not true, I had an obligation to stand up. And you know what I did? I jive a suit on a couple of them, and they're running. We're begging more pardon now. in their court documents, they're now pleading that that is not what they meant. I'm sure you all would have heard it. That we stole $5 million of government money and put it in my wife's charity. And you know the thing about it, even without a scintilla of evidence, people believe it. So it got to the stage that I had to take a decision that, you know what, if you want to be reckless with your mouth, well, you're going to pay for your articulations. So you can be sure that that is almost a dead issue. It is totally untrue. The other situation that would have occurred is that you recognize that there's this international scandal, the Odebrecht Brazilian scandal, in which there was a construction firm that was bribing politicians throughout the planet. At least 14 countries would have been involved. Unfortunately, they were using a bank in Antigua, the Minor Bank, and between 2010 and 2014, I want you to know the dates, between 2010 and 2014, literally laundered billions of dollars to pay the bribes. We're not in government. We knew nothing about Minor Bank or Odebrecht. But the information out there is that it is a scandal created by my government. How so when we're not even in government? And by the way, they had a presence with the Antigua Overseas Bank, and in 2009, that's prior to acquiring Minor Bank, they actually laundered nearly $1 billion. All of it happened under the UPP. Now subsequently, after they got into trouble, it would appear as though some group of them had some wise plan that they wanted to bribe the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, but they didn't recognize it was the wrong man they're trying to bribe. So I'm told, because I don't know these people, not even the former ambassador to Brazil I had a relationship with. In fact, if I see him today, I don't even know him. He was appointed by the former UPP administration, and unfortunately it was a carryover from that regime, in that nobody really took the opportunity to strip him of his appointment. So the point I'm making here is that totally unfamiliar, and when you look at the claim, they said that they wanted to bribe the Prime Minister to stop the government of Antigua and Barbuda from sending the documents to incriminate them to Brazil. But what they did not know is that prior to them hatching that plan, that the documents were already sent 6 months before. So there's no way that it could have worked because the documents were already sent. But clearly they did not know. At least if they had a conversation with me, I could have said, by the way, they could not have had any such conversation with me. But even if they were to, I could have said to them, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, because information is already sent. So the point I'm making here, there was no bribe action by my government. The only smoking gun is that a former ambassador, Casroy James, ended up doing a transaction with them for 2 million euros. We can vouch for the nature of the discussions with the ambassador. The ambassador issued a written public statement confirming that it was a CIP initiative. Now we can only speculate, but certainly I'm not in a position to speak to it as to what a transaction was about. What I can say to you categorically, as the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, of your beloved country, that this man here never had any discussion with anybody directly or indirectly associated with Odebrecht about any possibility of any bribery. I never solicited any funds from them. I never received any funds from them. And in any event, even if they had solicited my assistance, I could not have helped them. Because first of all, the documents, let me explain to you the process. Whenever there is an eminent request, it goes to the Attorney General's office, and between the Attorney General and the DPP, they will determine whether or not Antigua and Barbuda will cooperate with the request. And having made that decision, they then send the documents to ONDCP, and then you would have some involvement by the FSRC as well. In fact, for anyone to have effected such a bribe, they would have to have control over a lot of people. And I know that the individuals who run the ONDCP, and certainly FSRC, they're people of integrity, so it could not have happened. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that there was no such bribery, and to disabuse the minds of those who may think that that is the case. In fact, I've gone as far as literally putting everyone on notice who seek to sully my name by calling my name with Odebrecht, that I'll sue them. Most recent was a paper in Spain, El País, in which they carried an allegation. And I want to emphasize an allegation. And I got onto them, I got my attorneys in the UK and Spain to get onto them, and they have since rectified the initial statement by stating that it was an allegation, it is uncorroborated, and published all of the documents that I presented to confirm that there was nothing but probity on the part of my government. Now again, the whole idea is to put everything on the table, issues of even allegations of corruption, so that you can ask any questions, feel free, and at the same time to ensure that we have full and respectful participation this evening. Now the most important issue that we're here to address is the crisis on Barbuda. Unfortunately, on September 6th, Hurricane Irma literally decimated our sister island Barbuda. We have been extremely lucky in Antigua. In fact, there's literally carnage all around us. Carnage to the north of us, to the south of us. And I would say that I don't think it's luck really. It's divine intervention that Antigua is still standing today. And I want those of you who are praying individuals to continue to pray for our country, to pray for our government, to pray for our people, both Antiguans and Barbudans, because we are one people. We're a unitary state. Not even a twin island state, but a unitary state. One people, one system. Not one people, two systems, or three systems. I want to make that abundantly clear. So, we had the unfortunate situation in which the island was decimated by Hurricane Irma. And you recognize that Hurricane Irma is the strongest hurricane to have stormed its way through the Atlantic. And when you look at the storm force winds or hurricane force winds of up to 230 miles per hour, there's absolutely no way that we would not have had substantial damages in Barbuda. If it was Antigua, we would have had a significant amount of damage as well. The sheer force of the winds was such that any country that would have been in the direct path of that hurricane would have been severely damaged, even here in the United States. So we have to understand that the hurricane itself was unprecedented in terms of its size and the ferocity of the winds. Unfortunately, or let's put it this way, I had the unfortunate experience of being the first person to observe the damage in our sister island, Barbuda. A few hours after the storm, I journeyed to Barbuda, only to observe that there was a distinct contrast between what happened in Antigua and what happened in Barbuda. For me, it was unexpected because, as you know, most of the properties in Barbuda, they are concrete properties, and I had absolutely no reason to think otherwise than perhaps the damage would have been similar to what pertained in Antigua, which was minimal. So for me, it was a most painful emotional experience to see the devastation in Barbuda. And Barbuda today, unfortunately, is a mangled wreck. Absolutely mangled. It is temporarily uninhabitable. Now, we also had an impending threat in Hurricane Jose a couple of days later. And there's no way that we could have allowed the Barbudan residents to remain on the island in properties that were damaged. In fact, 95% of the properties on Barbuda were damaged. And this is no exaggeration, it's not a hyperbole, it's a matter of fact. So that if they were to sustain another Category 5 hurricane, in fact, it need not to have been Category 5, it would be a Category 1 hurricane for that matter, under those conditions, there would have been carnage in Barbuda. So we had to do the responsible thing and to evacuate them to Antigua. We were successful with the evacuation, and even here in New York, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of the Antiguans who participated in the evacuation. In fact, it's a matter of hours, less than a day, that we had to evacuate an entire island. It was literally all means possible. We were lucky in that we had a military aircraft on island from Venezuela, which helped us with the evacuation, but we had to get creative. One of the means of transportation to Antigua was utilizing a barge that ordinarily carries sand and aggregates. We had to literally place 200 souls on a barge and get a tug to pull them to Antigua. But again, as I said before, where there's a will, there's a way. And we got it done, with the grace of God. Now, I have to admit too that Antiguans have been very gracious. They have opened up their homes to the Barbudans. Many of them are accommodated in Antiguan homes. The others, we have some, unfortunately, still in shelters, who are now trying to get out of the shelters into more comfortable accommodation. We are presently preparing a number of buildings to accommodate them. We'll also rent some homes. There are some too who are accommodated at hotels, because at the time we had to make a quick decision to provide them with accommodation. And I would say so far that the relief aspect of it is going very well. Antiguans have stepped up to the plate. They have contributed significantly to the relief efforts. And I know some of you here would have contributed as well, and we're very pleased with your contributions. The difficulty that we'll have going forward, though, is to rebuild Barbuda. The preliminary estimates are such that it will take in the region of 250 million United States dollars to rebuild Barbuda. That is a daunting task. And for those of you who do not understand the size of the Antiguan economy, the Antiguan economy is 1.5 billion US dollars. It's a small economy, a microeconomy. That's the size of a small or medium-sized enterprise here in the United States. The actual amount of income that we earn annually is about 250 million US dollars. So if we had to take a decision to rebuild Barbuda within the next year from domestic resources, it would have meant that we cannot pay a single debt, that we could not even buy food. That's the enormity of the task ahead of us. It means therefore that the resource requirements to rebuild Barbuda is beyond the means of the country. So we are now rallying international support, and even support from those of you here in the diaspora, to help us to raise the necessary resources to rebuild. We know that those of you here, you have always been generous. Many of you have been remitting funds to your relatives at home on a regular basis, of which we are very grateful. But at the same time, the magnitude of the amount of funds that we need to raise requires us, as a government, to rally the international community to contribute towards rebuilding efforts. So far, we have made some progress. We have had a number of friendly governments who would have assisted. So, for example, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, they have pledged 3 million US dollars, of which we've collected 1 million US already. We've had the government of Qatar pledging $500,000 US, the Chinese government, $500,000 US in the first instance, and they have also pledged to make further contributions towards the rebuilding initiative. We've also had several other friendly governments, including the Dominican Republic. They have agreed to rebuild a school in Barbuda. And even regional governments, with their very meager resources, have made contributions. And we are especially grateful that countries, even with their meager resources, have chosen to assist. As you know, just recently, Dominica was hit by Hurricane Irma. And even though we have our own challenges, we recognize too that we have to stand in solidarity with Dominica. And despite our own problems, we made a contribution of $300,000. We're sending relief supplies to Dominica as well. The reality is we have no choice but to stand together. Because the truth is, the international community is very cold. Getting finances and support even from the United States, as an example, is like pulling teeth. In fact, it's worse than pulling teeth. Because as far as they're concerned, Antigua and Barbuda is a high-income country, high-income in inverted commas. And that precludes us from borrowing at concessional rates or to get grant funding, which makes our development even more difficult. And that is an issue that we have been fighting on behalf of the entire Caribbean and small island states globally, that you cannot preclude vulnerable small island states from much needed developmental financing by creating these artificial impediments. we take objection to that type of buffoonery as far as we're concerned. So you're saying that a country is in crisis and you cannot assist because they have a relatively high per capita income? Even the British, as an example, they have acknowledged it to be a flawed approach to use that criterion, because even with their British territories in the Caribbean that were damaged, they are precluded from providing much needed financing because of that flawed criterion of per capita income. So we continue to agitate internationally, globally, on that issue, even on the issue of climate change, because what we're seeing in the Caribbean is that we're having more ferocious storms and more frequent storms. In fact, I'm told now that Lee is on its way, yet another hurricane. So it is clear that we are literally suffering from the consequences of climate change. It doesn't matter who does not believe in climate change. The science is there to support that climate change is real. And in the Caribbean, we are feeling the effects of climate change. What is required is full global responsibility for all countries, for all presidents to take responsibility, especially the large polluters. And we hope that the United States in particular will take responsibility to get on board with the Climate Accord and to provide leadership for this existential threat that is facing the planet. But going back to the specific issue of rebuilding Barbuda, it is evident that we now have to prepare for more frequent and stronger storms. It means that we have to institute a far more robust building code in Barbuda. It means that no longer should we build wooden structures on Barbuda. Otherwise, you will be building wooden structures to be destroyed by the next hurricane. So clearly, there must be concrete structures, possibly, maybe not in all instances, but in some instances with concrete roofs. Possibly to use piles going into the bedrock and to have them elevated a few feet above the ground because the island is flat. Now, in every challenge, there are opportunities to be exploited. And this is an opportunity to transform Barbuda going forward into a climate resilient and green economy. Already, we have raised a significant amount of resources to transform Barbuda into a green economy. We have a commitment of a few $1 million already from the UAE to provide a solar plant with batteries on Barbuda, so that I suspect that within the next year, we will have that facility installed and Barbuda will become the only totally green island on the planet. So, notwithstanding the financial challenges, you can be assured that we are a resilient people. Our forebears went through 400 years of slavery and colonialism, and they triumphed over that. Therefore, we can triumph over any hurricane. We have it. We can do it. But there must be changes. We have to be responsible as a government. We cannot build structures that are not resilient to climate change. Now, we are rallying the international community for resources. And on the basis that we are successful in raising at least an amount that will help us to rebuild, even not in its entirety, at least partially, we have to spend those funds responsibly. We cannot go and utilize those funding to build unsustainable structures. They must be built in a different way, in a sustainable way. Now we have an unfortunate situation in Barbuda in which 99% of the properties are uninsured. Now we can't continue like that going forward. People have to take responsibility. You must insure your properties. Because what has happened is that ordinarily when you have these disasters, you have insurance to mitigate against that risk. And by the way, I want the Barbudans to understand, especially those of you who are here, that the risk of damage to personal property is your personal risk, not the government's risk. And I don't want to sound insensitive here, but I want us to determine fact from fiction and to have an honest discussion about these issues. When you do not insure your property and you have damage, especially with the magnitude of BROWNE, which is unprecedented, you have now transferred that personal risk to the government. So whereas ordinarily the government's responsibility would have been to rebuild the public institutions and infrastructure, we now have to carry the added burden of rebuilding properties and building new ones that were demolished. Now that in itself creates a problem. Now we do accept it as a government that we must provide some level of relief for homeowners. We have already taken the decision that the level 1 and level 2 properties that could be repaired, that will make material, building material available to actually repair those properties. However, those that have been demolished, we have to build new properties. The question is, can we build new properties that perhaps may cost us up to $200,000 dollars a piece and just give them away like that? Yes. Or isn't it a need for at least for the homeowner to have some equity, some skin in the game, even to pay for 1/3 of it? And if that is the case, what is the mechanism that we will put in place to ensure that they get a mortgage for the 1/3? Which comes to the issue now of the land. By the way, let's get it louder now. Let's get it louder now. I also want you to understand too that in Barbuda, there are some pretty large homes, concrete homes that were demolished. And the question is, where these people who would have utilized all their life savings to build these properties, where they going to get the money to rebuild these big properties? Because you have to understand that government properties that we would build to assist, they're going to be modest properties. So those of you who want to have your mansions, you have to fund it yourselves. Maybe you get a little support from the government, but we cannot justify using public funds to build a property that is 3,000 square feet. We may be able to justify doing one for maybe up to 1,000 square feet. So the point I'm making here is that you have a number of Barbudans, and I want to say here, we're speaking about Barbudans. Let me make it abundantly clear that when it comes to the land issue, we are respecting the myth that the land is owned in common by the Barbudans. I know that's the myth. But let me make the point here. By the way, I'm not trying to be controversial.